Welcome to Spot Check, the weekly video update series for the greatest unreality, a dissertation about Dungeons & Dragons. I am Nick Miser. So this week I wanted to talk about something that was prompted in my thoughts by continuing to transcribe the interview with Kevin and Jesse in Seattle, who I mentioned last week. One of the things that Jessie mentioned was that she'd been thinking about the fact that they play board games with a lot of people casually, but that there's another level of commitment involved in playing a game regularly with someone, a role-playing game, in an ongoing campaign. And so that got me thinking about the levels of intimacy and closeness expressed in the various games that we play and the types of commitments involved there. As social activities, games are, of course, embedded in relationships, and different kinds of games can be expressive of different kinds of relationships. So, like Jesse said, a board game is something that people can generally play casually with people that they don't know very well. There's not a lot of vulnerability that's required in most board games, at least. But in a role-playing game, you're opening yourself up creatively and potentially being vulnerable to the people by throwing out creative ideas. Even if it's not a sensitive topic, you're throwing out your creativity. And then so in the same way that maybe other performers, actors, and musicians have to be vulnerable to one another in order for the creative process to work, I think some of those same kinds of things go on in a role-playing game. And that's part of why people keep playing. Like I said, and I've mentioned before, when you ask someone why they game, and someone who's been a gamer for a long time, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say something about the friendships that they've developed through gaming and those relationships that gaming has served as sort of a medium for developing. And so I wanted to think about what types of relationships are involved in games, what types of intimacies and vulnerabilities do people open themselves up to in gaming. There's a certain way of knowing someone that is only accessible through gaming because it's a unique experience that you share with someone. And the nature of that gaming experience is going to change the type of relationship that's implied in the gaming encounter. So a one-shot convention game where you're never going to see the person again might not be the kind of intimacy that I'm talking about here. Although if it is a very good gaming session where people get a lot out of it and they really enjoy the experience, that might serve as the impetus for forming a relationship that probably involves continuing to play games with them and developing a relationship around that centerpiece. But in your standard sort of ongoing campaign gaming group, there's a week-to-week or month-to-month or however often they're meeting connection where you know that the people are going to be there. And if you look at the content of what you're doing, one of the things you're doing is on a weekly or bi-weekly or whatever basis, you're pretending to be characters who care about each other enough to get each other's backs and keep each other alive. So the characters are putting their lives in each other's hands, and there's a certain sense in which that sort of translates out into the relationships that happen at the table. Now, anthropologically, there are some other tools ready at hand that we can use to look at the relationships that exist in a gaming group. One of those would be exchange. When we're looking at social connections, we look at how are they exchanging goods and services in their lives. And so we usually break that down into balanced reciprocity and generalized reciprocity would be 2 major categories. So in balanced reciprocity is where you give someone something and then you expect that they're going to give something back to you in equal or greater measure than what you gave them. A sort of a tit for tat, I scratch your back, you scratch mine sort of relationship. And those types of exchanges are typically expressive of relationships with a little bit of distance involved. They're not highly intimate. Where you have generalized reciprocity is in very close relationships among family members, among very close friends. And this is where you're going to give to the group, you're going to give to other people in the group without necessarily expecting a specific return on that investment, so to speak. You expect that other people in the group will also be contributing, but you're not keeping a tally sheet of exactly what you've given so that they can give exactly back. And on a lot of levels, you see in gaming groups generalized reciprocity relationships developing, even if it's just on the level of snacks, of people bringing food in and sharing that amongst the table. So you can see, even on a sort of microeconomic level, that the gaming relationship allows people to move closer, and as they begin sharing those things, they begin to experience probably closeness in other areas of their lives as well. But there's a tension here too that I've seen develop in gaming groups as people navigate the closeness that they feel through gaming together and whether or not or to the extent to which that's going to translate into closeness in other areas of their lives. One of the reasons for this tension is that a lot of people find that when they're at the table, when they're in the in-game experience, they shut out the things that are happening in other areas of their lives, just partially because that's necessary for them to have that imaginative experience and engage in the character and in the world of the role-playing game. They have to put those things aside in the same way that an actor or a public speaker or in lots of areas and roles that you take on in life, there's always things that you're going to exclude from that role that you're taking on. And so when people bring outside things to the table, sometimes that can create tension if there's different understandings of how permeable those boundaries are going to be and how much people want to share. And this can also be a problem when there's a group of close friends who also in the gaming group have people that they're not as close to, but they game with regularly. And navigating those close friendships, then the not close friendships that coexist in the gaming group altogether can be a difficult thing that comes up in a lot of groups. So I'd like to hear your experiences of relationships through gaming. How has gaming helped to develop friendships, relationships in your life? What tensions have come up as people negotiate that intimacy level that's required? Have you noticed that there is a change in the experience of gaming when you game with people that you can trust and to be open and vulnerable with versus people that you might not really know that well and you don't want to kind of put yourself in their hands in that same way? I'd like to hear from you on those things, and I will talk to you all next week.